Are we ready, Ray? All right, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday, November 16th, 2015 City Council meeting. At this time, I will call the meeting to order, and we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Shelley, if you'll do roll call for us, please.
Okay. Albertson?
Here.
Bueller? Bueller?
Here.
Danforth?
Here.
Manti? Here. Riefenberger?
Here.
Roby?
Here.
Solom?
Here.
Thorson?
Here.
Tupper?
Here.
Vilhauer?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Shelley. At this time, I'll look for a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda. Motion by Bruce, second by Beth. Any questions, changes? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, approval of the agenda. I'll look for a motion and a second. Motion by Mike. Second by Dan. Any questions, any changes? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 3, ordinance number 15-28, amending section 2.0103, regulating packaged liquor licenses within and for the city of Watertown. This is the second reading, and what I would like is a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mike. Second by Bruce, or who was it? Was it Bruce? Okay, Bruce. This here, guys, is the ordinance we talked about during the work session a while back. What we're looking at, I'm just trying to find it in my folder here, item number 3. I can read this here. I'm sure you all have, but it's ordained by the City of Watertown that Section 2.0103, the revised ordinances of the City of Watertown regulating packaged liquor license be amended as follows. No license shall sell, serve, or allow to be consumed on the licensed premises any alcoholic beverages at any time or on any day not permitted by South Dakota Code CDCL, Section 35. No licensee shall sell, serve, or allow to be consumed on the licensed premises any malt beverages prior to 1 o'clock p.m. on any Sunday. Packaged liquor licenses may elect to sell any malt beverage, distilled spirits, or wine on Sunday from 1 o'clock p.m. to 12 o'clock midnight. The above and foregoing ordinance was motioned, so if there's any questions on this we discussed about selling, wine and hard liquor inside the liquor establishments. I know Mr. May is here. If you had any questions, we can definitely have him come up to the podium and ask a question.
Shelley, we talked about times on that, but this is pretty much the state.
No, that's not exactly correct.
No,
The state doesn't do
Yeah,
that.
actually, when you read state statute, you can sell on Sundays if it's allowed by the governing body, and when you have things like that, then you set the time. So at the time that this ordinance was put into place, the council at that time had determined that 1 p.m. to midnight, and of course you can't talk about anything after midnight because then it's Monday and then it's regulated by state statute. So that's just part of it.
Yeah, and I think the 1 o'clock is, if you want to come up to the microphone, if you would, and state your name, and then we want to ask you a couple questions. I think what had happened is that we're currently at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It had been mentioned 8 o'clock in the morning. Nobody really had any appetite for that. But the council does have the opportunity to set hours. You wouldn't have to be at those hours, if I understand correctly, because right now it's 1 to 12. You're from 1 to 5 or 6, if I'm not mistaken. You could actually set this for 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock or 1. Doesn't mean you have to open at that time, am I correct? Okay. So my question is to anybody here on the council, do you want to leave it at 1 o'clock as it is now? Do you want it there? Or would you like to set it at 12 o'clock or 11 o'clock? And the council has that opportunity to make that change.
I thought at our last meeting, Stanton did state that state law
Yes, he stated that it was an error.
was it? Okay.
Yep.
I like 11, to be honest with you. There's things you got to do during the day, get ready. I like 11.
And I guess my, John May here, guess my input, ever since this has been going on is I've had a lot of people approach me and talk to me about it. And, I haven't heard but maybe 2 people, you know, that really didn't like it, but I've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people. And I guess a lot of them did mention, you know, being open a little bit earlier probably for them would be beneficial because, you know, they do their things in the mornings and then they're proceeding to they want to be done and at home by early afternoon. You know, as Sundays, many people just take the afternoon off and do whatever they kind of want to do. It's their day off. So I guess I kind of see they're voicing their opinion on, you know, if we can be open, if we look at it and we want to, like you said, it comes down to us as the business owners. It doesn't mean that I'm going to. It just takes it out of the realm, you know, maybe a year or 2 down the road, we take a look at it, and then all of a sudden we're back right here doing this again. So,
And I think that's a good point, you know, because all of a sudden now you've opened it up for the liquor licenses, you know, to sell the liquor. And then all of a sudden, you're right, a year from now or 2 years from now, people are going to come in and say, gosh, can't we open up at noon or can't we open up at 11? I think if it was given the opportunity and you did open at 11, they'd probably, everybody be open at 11. If it was set at 1 o'clock, they'd all be at 1 o'clock. So it's just a decision you guys need to make, and if you wanted to leave it as is or make a change to this ordinance.
I'd like to ask a question to the group here. I've had some comments on this, more comments in favor of than against it. What have you guys heard?
I've heard one comment, and that was against it. That's all. You know, so it's not a real big issue. I really think that it'd probably be more of an issue if we started a little bit earlier. I mean, it's been pretty much custom 1 o'clock to whatever closing time, and I think we're reaching there. So
I haven't really,
I got nothing against earlier, I guess, but I mean, I think we would get some opposition then. So
I haven't really had any comments, too many, none against, a few for. People said it would be nice if they could open at least at 11 or 12 rather than 1, whether they're going to the lake or they're doing whatever. They would just as soon 11 or 12 rather than 1.
I had one negative, but realistically, she realized that you know, this is the where we're heading, and there's no going back, and had more than that in favor of it. As to the time, you know, I heard 11, I heard 1. I'd say let's go with 12 and compromise.
I've heard just from a couple of people, nothing negative. Really, the basic comment is they really don't understand why there's a limit on it anyway, why it hasn't been, is really what I've been communicated.
I would echo that comment. Most of my friends or acquaintances or people who stop me on the street have said, why haven't we done this all along? You know, and that was kind of their comment. And I, too, am fairly flexible on the time, you know, if we want to split the difference of 11 and 1 or whatever.
So John, if it is you, it's your establishment, would you prefer 11, 12, or leave it as 1? What do you prefer?
As a business owner, you know, 11 o'clock to me is, or noon, horse apiece. 11 would be, you know, for me, what I would like to see, because I'm an early riser. I kind of get my running around done early, so.
Okay.
And, you know, the question to me is why would we have such a big debate on, are we thinking it's a moral issue that we shouldn't have it open before noon, or, I mean, that's really the question you got to ask is, I don't see a problem whether it's 11 or noon or 1. I really don't see a problem with any of them. But the real question then becomes, if it's not, if we stick with 1 or 12, why not 11? I mean, there's got to be a reason for it.
The reason I look at 11 is, you know, you've got a football season. A lot of people like to be at their house, sitting down, watching their football game at noon. Whether they're going to be drinking beer or not, they'd like to be home, and they're not going to leave that house until 3, 4 o'clock again. You know, so it would make sense to have it so they can get done, and I believe the races start at the same time.
Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor as the ordinance is written. If we wanted to change that, we would have to have somebody amend that motion if they want to make that motion. Yeah, Would you want to amend it to 11?
I will amend it to 11 because I haven't had a justification as to why it shouldn't be there.
Okay. And who made the second? Was it Bruce? Okay. So I have an amended motion on the floor, the time change from 11 a.m. Any other questions?
Just stupid one, because apparently I don't do that on Sunday, and I have nothing against it, but so right now you don't, what time do you open on Sunday?
We open at 1.
That's because that's what the,
Yeah.
what the law
You know, and that's
that's
kinda
what the
like
law
we-
is right now.
Yeah.
All we would be changing on this other one is it's still 1 o'clock, but it allows for the hard liquor.
On the first
Okay,
one.
but I have
now
no I have no
he
problem
made
with
the
11,
But
so.
Bill, he made he amended his motion that
Yep.
it is open at 11 and
Yep.
also on the liquor.
Yeah, I just wanted to for sure when that, because this is what bothered me before is why would you be open, can only sell beer? So that's, as long as it's everything, well, I'm okay with the 11, I
Now,
don't see a problem.
one quick question I got, and I don't know if it's, because they all just use drive-up window. Is there actually an ordinance that's,
No, I think the drive-up window is because they could not sell liquor, so they
okay,
will
so
be able
at
to
this
go
point, we're
inside.
gonna open it up to, so
It
you
was
can
a
open your front door?
convenience thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that only makes sense. That's why I'm asking the question, so it's clear out in the open right now,
Yeah.
so.
All right, so I've got a motion and a second on the floor. We've had a lot of discussion. I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. One quick question. I don't know, Shelley, if you know, when can they take place on this? When can they start? Is it 20 days after this published?
20 days after publication, which would be
Okay.
20 days after
So
Saturday.
we'll publish this, and 20 days after that, then you're good to go.
Sounds good.
Assuming, yeah, there's nothing out there. Perfect. Thank you very much, John. Appreciate it. Okay, number 4. The ordinance number 15-29, amending section 7.0907, regulating the residency requires of employees of the city of Watertown. As it reads right now, I'm going to bring this up, number 4. I'm going to just read this quick. Be it ordained by the City of Watertown that Section 7.0907 of the revised ordinance of the City of Watertown be amended as follows. All employees of the City of Watertown, South Dakota shall be required to reside within 35 miles of the city limits. And it goes on. It's hard to read when they got all these lines through this stuff, you know. New employees whose work includes new employees shall be allowed a reasonable time to obtain residence within said area. Any employee whose work includes emergency services or standby must live within a 15-mile response time of city limits. And be aware of that, the city limits. 15 minutes response time of city limits. Under regular weather conditions and following all posted speed limits, the provision of this section shall not be deemed to apply to any employee of the Watertown Municipal Utilities Department. So what I'll look for is a motion and a second for discussion on this.
So moved.
Motion by Randy, second by Glenn. Doug, you want to come up, because I know you've kind of been thrown into the fire on this thing, and we'd like to hear what you have to say. And Rob, you might come up and grab a chair also, since you guys are here. I know that you and I have had numerous discussions, and you kind of were talking about this today. So maybe fill the group in what you're thinking.
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, I'm basically in favor of our current ordinance as it's written, and I'm also okay with the new ordinance that's before us. Talk a little bit about Cottington County. The current ordinance, I think it was 2 years ago when this ordinance change came about through personnel policy. And at first I'm going, the corners, 28 miles, that is quite a ways up there in the corners. Part of our mission statement is we protect and serve our community. And I have 700 square miles of EMS coverage, basically most of Cottington County, and we have 327 square miles of fire protection. So what I was really looking at is I'm allowing these guys guys and gals to protect and serve our community, but not allowing them to live out in those corners. So that the ordinance got changed to Cottington County. And like I said, it's really good because if the firefighters want to pick up a small acreage, I think that's what they might do. On the flip side, the new ordinance proposal that states 15 minutes from city limits, you know, I think I'm okay with that too, because basically there may be some acreages down just outside of town. Over towards Kransburg, there's about a 10-mile area in Connington County and about 8 miles south. So this would expand those areas out a little bit on those. The only one thing that you know, that might help is I was talking to the police chief a little bit, and where it says 15 minutes, whether it should be 15 minutes or 15 miles. That's the only thing that we thought maybe would clear things up if you folks did decide to.
Yeah, I
to
think
adopt this.
the 15 mile to me would be totally different than what we're looking at, because 15 miles from 28 from the city limits, you know, you're shortening it up to 20 miles. I mean, instead of the 35. So I'm just saying, to be clear, you're talking 15 minutes to Memorial Park, or you know, that, because that is our area. I think what we also need to be, and that's for your emergency people. I think
Yes.
another thing we need to be aware of is, do we want to have people living, how close is Minnesota border? You know, I mean, 33 miles? Yeah, so the thing is, do we want to have people living in Minnesota working in Watertown? So I think that needs to be addressed also. Rob, can you fill us in a little bit about your department? How do you handle it?
You know, the thing I'm looking at, this, I think this would work fine. I think it's a good idea to expand, you know, our area to look for new employees. I am a little concerned about, you know, right now, the 15 miles from the city limits on the, you know, out by Memorial Park, 15 minutes from there, that being the city limits. It's a long haul into town at that, you know, if somebody lives 15 minutes from that location. Otherwise, the rest of Watertown won't be that long of a response time, so.
I had a suggestion as I was reading this, and I probably was thinking along the same lines you were, is that if you started by emergency service or standby must live, instead of say must live, could say must be available at duty station within a 15-minute response time. Now, that's an option that could give the person who lives wherever he wants to live that chance, but also know that it's his responsibility, however he needs to do it, whether it's stay overnight or sleep on the floor or whatever. But if you say be at their duty station within a 15-minute response time, that takes away that all the way from Memorial Park all the way into town piece of it, because I do understand where you guys are coming from. At the same time, I'd like to allow the city to have a bigger opportunity and our employees to have greater choices as to where to live. I don't know, does that make sense to anybody?
Yeah, you take that northwest corner and you put Memorial Park into the picture, now you're 30 minutes from your workstation, really. Where if you're living south of town, your 15 minutes maybe is 20 minutes from your workstation. So.
My
Right,
problem
so
with
if you
this,
put, be at your duty station within 15 minutes, I think that's what we're trying to achieve, right? Is that, or within 20 minutes? I mean, I guess the 15 minutes, you're right. Depending on what direction you're coming from, getting to city limits in 15 minutes could be 30 minutes to work.
to be honest with you, I don't know who could make it even 5 miles out in 15 minutes response. You got to wake up. You got to get out of your house. You got to drive. This is a response time. This is not saying drive time.
So just, I did a little research on this, and I actually talked with a lot of people. So just a little comparison. Sioux Falls has no requirements. They used to have a 10-mile requirement about 8 or 10 years ago. They did away with that. Rapid City has no residency requirement. They do have a response time of 45 minutes. I'm not sure what that all means, but that's what I was told. Mitchell has no residency requirement for the police, but they do have a residency requirement, a 15-minute response for fire personnel. They grandfathered in people that had previously been further than that. And then I had a real long conversation with the gentleman out of Aberdeen. Actually, he says, we've tried everything. It was actually pretty fun talking because they have tried everything. And where Aberdeen settled upon it was they have all regular employees of the Aberdeen must reside within 15 miles of City Hall, and they are extremely rigid about that. If it's 15.001, you're outside the boundary. They have tried other things, and he says, we've just came back to that because that's what worked well for them. I would make a couple comments here, that the timing thing that's so subjective. I think you make a good point in that you got to get up and all that. So I'm thinking if we do a time issue that's so subjective, I would probably rather see some type of a mileage requirement because it's something we can actually judge, and it's, I think, fair to all concerned. The other piece about the mileage here, if you'd asked me Friday, I would not have voted for this, but I've talked with enough people that they've convinced me that what it comes right down to, the common theme was we want the best people we can get for the job. And then sometimes that's going to require us going outside the city. I would prefer they live in the city and pay taxes in the city, although they will probably pay a sales tax. I just would say I question the 35 miles. Mayor, you bring up a good point. 35 miles does put you over the edge into Minnesota. And if I'm 35 miles south of Watertown, I'm closer to Brookings than I am to Watertown. So to try and summarize that very long diatribe, I think we ought to look at a firm number of miles versus time. And in terms of, for the emergency personnel and for the other ones, I'd probably pull it in from 35 a little bit.
I'm trying to really grasp what you said there. You know?
Well, I wanted to give you a feel for what we've
Yeah.
seen, for what other cities have seen. So again, I look at a couple cities have no requirements, whatever. Aberdeen has a firm 15-mile. And by the way, those cities I mentioned all have full-time, I think, fire and police departments.
So if we had a circle right around Watertown and you went out 30 miles and not worry about the 15 minutes, I know that you had talked to Mitchell about their 15 minutes for emergency personnel. You could actually easily go 30 miles and still be within that 15-minute response time. I would think.
I think there
I'd
should
have
be
a
two
two-tier.
circles.
A smaller
circles.
circle for emergency personnel, then maybe 30 for others.
Don, is your concern on the 35 that we go into Minnesota?
It's just,
Because if that's the case, then put it at 35 miles and a resident of South Dakota.
Exactly.
And then we're covered. Because if you go 30 miles.
Yep.
Now Clark, there's a number of people that commute from Clark here all the time, they would be out of the picture. And I think that's a community, and those that are within that 35-mile range, I think, I'd love to have those people coming here and working in our community. And if that means that it's for the city of Watertown, then so be it.
The other thing to me is the difference. Are we talking 35 miles outside of city limits, which is a moving target, or draw a circle from the center of town? Because this
From the
says city
center of town.
limits.
Yeah. From the
From
center.
Kemp and Broadway? I mean, like it was always set years ago.
I think that makes more sense.
With Todd sitting in the audience, I would say that we would use the center of town as the airport now. Yeah, just so, because that's gonna come back, that's gonna haunt us, right, Todd, if we don't, okay. So we
Okay,
want to do
Okay.
that.
So then,
How about if I amend my motion to read 35 miles within city limits within the state of South Dakota, and for the emergency services or standby must live within 15 miles of the center of the city.
As defined by the airport.
Randy, you mean the first one, center of the city also?
yeah. So but I do want to ask these gentlemen one more time. Are we looking at, when you say emergency services, 15-minute response time versus 15 miles, what's the goal? What's the objective? How fast do you want your people there? Because, there's good points made about, wake up, roll out, get dressed, get in your car, get going. So 15 minutes is not very long, and yet 15 miles could still put you at Memorial Park and then another 20 minutes in. So what's the goal? Is the goal to have them at their duty station? I know some cities that I've talked to, they just stated in their employee agreement that they must be at their assigned duty station, XYZ, is how they stated. And then they leave it up to the employee to figure out how to do that.
Personally.
Yeah, but Beth, if I live a mile south of town and they call me up at 2 in the morning and I'm in bed, I may still not make it within that 20 minutes. I mean, by the time you get out of bed, get dressed, get out to your vehicle. You know, it's that time limit is, I mean, yeah, it'd be a perfect world, but it's not,
I
so.
want to make a comment.
Saying about the
if-
time.
If I may, I'd like to make a comment because we have 2 fire stations. Both stations are fully manned. If there's a fire in Watertown, you are, you know, a 4-alarm fire, your guys are going to be on scene. Your guys are going to be out there putting out the fire. It's the other folks that are not on duty at the time that are going to be coming. So be aware that you've got 2 fire stations fully manned, and they're going to be there.
Yes, and your point about the 15 minutes versus 15 miles, our guys and gals don't respond from home in the emergency setting. They don't have the blue lights, so they're going to be driving the speed limits. We want them to drive safe. We do not want them to say, "Oh, I got to get to the station within 15 minutes," or you know, I'm going to get in trouble. So we don't want them speeding down the road. We just want them to respond to large fires and multiple EMS calls and keep them intact with their community that they serve.
That's why I like the 15 miles better. I've been around a few small towns and a fire whistle went off, and it's pretty dangerous, put it that way, so.
Ryan, would you like to make a comment?
Yeah, Ryan Remmers with the police department. We discussed this today with the command staff at our police department, and I was asked to kind of carry the water tonight since I was going to be here for another issue later on. And we kind of respect and understand where the fire issue is maybe a little bit different. Don, you talked about how Mitchell was different with police and fire. We just kind of want it to be known that we don't foresee our people responding from their homes, or that doesn't happen as often as what it does with Doug's fire people. So we don't have an issue with just the 35 miles, the way it was written or the way that you're proposing, whether it's the emergency. We'd prefer not to be lumped into the emergency services there because it would restrict potentially some employees from us not being able to hire them, and it doesn't really have any impact they were talking about in the 20 years that Chief McPeak has been there. It's just at most a handful of times that we've had to call people in off duty. Generally when they do, it's not as an emergent situation as what Doug's people are dealing with. They're being called in to follow up on a crime scene investigation or something, which that can wait an extra 10 minutes or it doesn't matter quite so much. So in summary, we don't mind the 35 mile the way it was written or the way that you're proposing there, but the police department would prefer not to be lumped into that emergency services. And that sounds odd because we clearly are emergency services, but we don't respond from home. You know, I may have to as a command staff member, but our rank and file patrol officers, they get done with their shift, they go home, they come back in on their next shift is there. Very rarely do they get called in.
You know, I think that I would hope that maybe emergency services isn't really right. Maybe it's really, you know, critical services, and I think it has to be up to the department head to make that decision who within, if it's used and to what extent it's used within the area of department. So if your chief says we don't need it, then it doesn't pertain to you. But that's how I would hope that we're taking a look at it, is working with our department heads and scrutinizing it, making sure that if we are applying this smaller area, that we're doing it appropriately and because it's necessary.
That's-
And if it's not necessary, I don't think it should be done.
That's what the city of Brookings did basically, is I think they did use the word critical services or whatever, and they took certain positions, as I mentioned before, and they put it right in the employment agreement that they, in the event of certain certain triggers, they would have to be at their duty station within a certain period of time. The gal at the Human Resources that said that they have 3 police officers who actually live in Sioux Falls, in Brookings, because of the same situation. They go home, they check out, and their wives both have kind of cushy medical jobs, I think, in Sioux Falls. So, but they like being on the Brookings Police Department. I mean, I think that's what she said. But so they just picked critical positions, and then they just said they have to be there within a certain period of time, and then they left it really up to the employee. They said nothing else beyond that, is because they don't have a residency requirement. They just used it as, they just used their employee agreement as to control who could they get there in a certain period of time.
Rob, is there something you want to share with us?
You know, it's the big thing for us is mainly the one on-call guy. Every day we do have somebody on call, and generally that person is called by the PD if there's a situation where they need a heavy lifting machine or something like that, or just something in the road that street normally would take care of. So, I mean, I guess response time in my mind is somewhat critical depending on the situation. If it's a tree across the highway, which happens occasionally if we have a high windstorm or a lot of wind or something like that, but in most situations, it's usually something small. So response won't be as critical in most situations.
You don't want half your staff living
Right.
35 miles out of town when we have a blizzard.
Well, and that's the other thing, too.
Because we can always call you in the middle of the night, move a tree, so.
Yeah.
Rob, Chief, I would ask you fellas, and we can identify what you do as critical services, but perhaps a way to do this is just to identify it's going to be the street department or the fire department if that's the direction that we go. But what would make sense to you guys as far as a distance? And Steve, to your point about the airport, maybe we make it just from the police department or the fire department, the in-town fire department. That way we're not saying it's the center of the city, but you're somewhat in the same proximity as the police department in town anyway. You know what I mean? But that's what I'd say is what do you guys think would be the right amount of distance for your employees to be?
Bruce, we talked a little bit about this in the past. The other thing to me is, what if you don't put that restriction in there and you just put a sentence in there that said, unless your job description requires something, and they have some control over it, and we don't try to make it one thing covers all.
Yeah, and to Bruce's point, you could have it, if they work for the fire department, they have to be X amount from the fire department or the police department or the wastewater. It could be set up that way rather than from the center of town or anything.
Absolutely. The other thing I would just like to point out is the reason we picked city limits as a possibility, and I do like the center of town or a fire station or something with a certain mileage better, but we can't control stoplights, stop signs, traffic, trains, things like that. So we don't want these guys to punch a time clock and say, okay, the train stopped me and things like that. So that's why we were looking at the edge of the city limits, but I do like the possibility of a fire station or something like that be in the center and going a certain mileage a little
Would
better.
be your
What distance
duty
would you guys
station.
recommend? What would you recommend for a distance?
Do you like the 35-15? Is that what you're leaning towards?
I like the 15 miles for my staff.
For all staff?
Yeah, all the firefighters.
They would all be considered emergency.
Yeah, I would have one administrative assistant that would not be hooked into that system.
Sure.
So.
So then, just to clarify, we're talking about for these different critical, instead of saying emergency services, critical services, is 15 miles from duty assignment, or because you have duty station or whatever, because that means that's the fire department, or that's the city street department. Is that what we're
I would say,
You get,
right? So it's the department based on the department versus emergency services.
so we're gonna have 3 circles.
We're not gonna have-
That-
no. If we make it so that it's
That's 3
it's
circles.
critical services, that's really the department head's call,
department
and
from-
they are saying to us that the 15-mile is a better option than 15 minutes.
Yeah, I want to break in on this because I really would prefer that we would use the airport as our center of town. It's on record. It's 35 miles or whatever from that spot, only because of other things that could. I would like to go on record that that's the center of our town. Yes,
You mean for the 35 miles, Steve, or for the 15?
whatever you use.
But-
I want the airport as that center.
I don't understand why.
Yeah.
Well, we have issues right now with our EAS service, looking at, we need to be 210 miles from Minneapolis Airport. By bringing in Lake Kempesca, which we did never change the center of Watertown, the center of Watertown with Lake Kempesca and to the east is almost at the airport doorstep. That then moves us out to 211 and a half miles, which gives us the EAS okay at 210. So I need, if you're going to look at a center of things, bring it at the airport. That way it's on record. That way we know where the center of Watertown is recognized at.
I do like the using their duty station though, the fire station. Did you say that? Yeah, the fire station or the street department or whatever it is that this critical person needs to be at.
we still got 2 different issues here, Rob. What do you What are you comfortable with? I mean,
No, I-
because yours isn't as time,
It's not as time
Yeah.
sensitive as fire.
Yep.
You know. and
Well, let me ask a
unless we
question.
have to
Why
come
can't
lift
we
a
leave it up
truck
to
off
the
of
department
somebody.
head to
Yes.
define the special amount of distance or time?
yep.
And just leave it at that.
So what we could do with this ordinance is just, we'll take the 35 miles into the state of, or within the state of South Dakota, and
Excluding, but they have to-
excluding,
they have to live in South.
yep. Excluding, the fire department, street department, which would be deemed up
Nope.
to department heads.
Nope, don't do that. It's just gonna be for critical services. as
Critical
deemed
services,
by
okay.
The department heads, and then leave the latitude as far as the time or distance up to each department head.
Because wastewater also has on-call staff too, so.
Okay, yeah, and that would, I mean, you never know when our departments may change a little bit, then we're sitting back here doing it again.
Right.
So I will amend my motion again to live within 35 miles of the city limit of city center of Watertown, but in the state of South Dakota, and to, how do I want to say that?
Yeah, you want it critical.
Any employee who works within critical services. Something, yeah, something will
To
be,
be determined by
that
the
will be
department.
determined by the department head.
I would like you, Randy, to put in there to have the center of town as the.
Airport.
At the airport.
Yep.
Yes.
35 miles within the center of Watertown being the municipal airport within,
Yeah, we can.
and within the state of South Dakota, yeah.
We just need it done. So, okay, so Randy, you amended your motion. Who seconded that?
I think I did, didn't I?
You want to read it back to us, what a motion is going to look like? No.
Okay, I'm trying to follow you guys, and I got lots of arrows here. So you're saying within 35 miles of the airport, within South Dakota,
Yes.
new employees whose work includes critical services or standby, what will be determined,
By the department head.
And then the response time to be determined by the department heads.
Yep.
Distances and response times, or whatever you want to call it.
You guys all okay with that, Ryan?
distances and response times?
Yeah, 'cause you
Will
realize
be
that-
determined by the department?
I
It
think
will be.
we'd be okay with that.
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Because we don't need to sit here and micromanage all your departments. That's what we got you guys for, so.
So,
Yeah.
Well, we may think so, but they may not agree with it, so.
All right.
What
So-
if department heads change and ideas change? I mean, we're leaving it wide open.
But they are the ones that
They're-
are virtually responsible for that department.
yeah.
Well, part of this is, like, for instance, our union contract, we looked at that today, and they're given an hour to get to work anyway. We can't, hold them accountable for, 'cause they need to get home, drop their kids off with wherever and come in, and, I mean, it's not like they can just instantly come into work, within that 15 minutes anyway, so just another issue on there.
Yep.
The county dealt with this, I guess, sometime within the past couple of years, and Chief McPeak printed off what they settled on, and theirs was up to the department head. Also, people could get an exemption by appearing in front of the county commission, so I don't know if that's something that you want to consider too, but I don't.
I think that's something that would be workable. I don't know. No?
But that would be up to the department head to bring it forward, though.
Let's go with what we got.
Yeah.
You want to read that back one more time to us now that you got it finished?
What I have is within 35 miles, basically, of the airport, within South Dakota, any employee whose work includes critical services or standby, the distances and response times will be determined by the department head.
Perfect.
Steve, can I just say 35 miles from the center of the city as defined as the airport?
Yes.
So then we have a definition, we've defined the airport as being the center of the city in this, and then
Yep.
otherwise that city thing is,
You don't have to put the airport name in there, just city that defines, yeah.
Because if it changes, it's just gonna
The
move.
city center could
And we're
change.
good with that. And that'll help us out on two fronts. So I've got Randy's motion. Who seconded that the first time?
That would be
Glenn, do you
Glenn.
want to second that?
That's fine.
What? Yes. Okay, any other questions?
I do have one question. If you don't define the emergency services thing, you're gonna, I mean, I think you're creating a lot of discussion and muddy water in the future. I think if you don't
Open-ended.
define that, yeah.
Very open-ended.
When I talked, for specifically the guy in Aberdeen, again, it was a very good conversation. He said, we have tried everything, and we had to finally just define it, because if we didn't, there were so many ifs and buts and ors, and when new people would come in, well, they'd want to do this, well, then they'd switch it this way, then that way, based upon new personnel. That's why they made it defined, and he said, when you have that, it's clear cut, and everybody knows what the parameters are.
I don't have any personnel in this conversation, but one point that could cover that particular topic is have that written into the job description that somebody applies for. Then they know whether they're in that group, or they'll know which group they're in and handle it by their personnel description, and that takes that element out of the.
That falls back on the department heads. That should be part of their job to write job descriptions, so. Or help write the job description.
I think we should have a defined distance from town, but I think the department head should be able to decide who is in that. Period.
Well, we
That
do
way
have-
it's defined, it's not wide open for changing and.
What do you do in a department head if we get a new department head? And he decides to change that,
That's
are
what I
we
was
gonna leave it up
asking.
to people, then do they have to move?
That's what I was asking, yes.
Aren't existing situations like that, haven't they been grandfathered in the past? I think what you're saying is they've been grandfathered.
Okay, let's move on. Let's get this done. We've batted this 15 minutes and 35 miles around a lot. Let's get this done. So what do you want to do? You want to have it as Shane suggested, as in the job description, that if you apply for this particular job, you have to be within a certain spot. That kind of takes the department head out of it. Does it not?
Well, I would like to just go with the 35 within South Dakota residents. Okay, then 15 for the emergency or critical. And the department head chooses which jobs are critical, period.
That's back to the same thing where we were.
Yep.
But they don't define the distance, we define that.
Rob, are you, with 35 miles, you're gonna get somebody in here in 40 minutes, 50 minutes anyway.
Right.
In vast majority of the time, that's gonna be sufficient. If you got something that's really critical, you're gonna have call-in people here locally anyway.
Right.
It's not like we're gonna have everybody living out there.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it would work for us. I just think response time in some situations could be critical. I haven't had anything since I've worked there where we've had, a semi turned over and where we had to get a loader out and help out. I mean, towing services would take care of most of that kind of stuff, but it's generally not that time sensitive. But snow and ice too, most of the time we know ahead of time if we're gonna need to be in at work at a specific time.
But I do know at times that you are called out to sand intersections.
Right, that's one thing, we try to, before the day is over, after the second day of snowstorm and stuff, we try to sand up before everybody goes home, but there's a lot of times our guy will get called in to sand intersections.
We could walk outside right now with a little bit of mist that has been going on. It could be icy. We don't know
Right.
that. So.
That is a good situation that you brought up there, that where we would be, it'd be more time sensitive, I guess.
I still think this is too loose.
I'm kinda lost
leaving the-
again.
Leaving the department head up to make the decision.
It's a bad night.
It's nothing new.
Simple. We could just go back and say they got to live within the city limits of Watertown.
Well, I think, I would rather see it, the 35, the 15, and just leave it as police and fire. Or
Police doesn't
fire.
want fire.
Because if you get,
I think-
and the airport, so,
Just leave it up to the department heads, Joe.
Yeah.
but if you get but like I said, you get a new department head and he decides to change the policy, then we got an ordinance that, then we're gonna be back to this in a year from now, 2 years from now. 5
Leave
years
the
from now.
decision of who it is up to the department heads. We make the circles.
Yeah, we
That's
make-
what I think.
We've got the 15 miles defined, John. It's just up to them who's required to be
Yeah.
who's considered
That
critical.
job
Yeah,
description,
but okay, let
that
me
job
ask you this.
description can
If
say.
you're living outside that 15 miles and a new department head comes in and he changed your job description, what are you gonna do?
Changing a job description has to go through a more significant process than just,
That goes
oops, I'm
through
gonna change.
HR. Yeah, the job description will go through HR. I like the idea of having the job description determine who has to be within that 15 minutes.
Oh, okay, so
that's
now,
up to that's up to the department head.
so now right.
Yep.
So now, what do you guys want to do? Because I'm hearing, do you want to do the 35 miles from the defined city center within South Dakota, and then the critical services or standby is 15 miles from the defined city center, and then critical services, standby is already in their job description, but critical services is defined in their job descriptions? Or what? What exactly do you guys want to approve?
Yeah, the department head would be a policy decision within that department.
Defining what critical services is?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Which positions are critical?
But you guys left even the mileage up to policy, and are you now?
I would think so.
Okay, so is everybody still
What do you
thinking
want,
that's the
15
motion?
minutes, 15 miles. You want a 35 and 15, is that what you guys want? I think we should table this and have better discussion on a work session and talk about it later. This is ridiculous. Let's get this done. 35, we okay with 35?
Yes.
35 and 15.
Are we okay with 15?
Yep.
That's up to the department head, talking about which job is critical?
Yep.
Everybody okay? Let's do it.
Okay. If
Somebody
that's
make that
that's the
motion just like
amended,
that.
if
Well,
that's
yeah,
the
that's the
amended
That's the
motion,
motion I got on the table.
That's
and
the
the
motion
second?
on. We got
Okay.
Glenn seconded. No more discussion. Let's vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Whew. We did her. Thank God. Okay.
Wait,
And I don't mean to be
you
crabby.
opposed. You had opposition.
Oh, was there opposition, really? I didn't hear it. Okay. Shelley, take roll call.
Wow, you don't know where you're at tonight, do you?
That's right. Who opposed that anyhow? Get out of here.
Okay. Start with Albertson. Bueller. Danforth.
Yes.
Manty. Riefenberger. Roby.
Yes.
Solem.
No.
Thorson. Tupper.
That's what you want.
Philhauer.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we did the 15. That's okay. Motion carried.
We're in the same boat.
Motion
that?
carried.
Motion carries. There you go.
Well,
Okay. This is the one we're probably going to need next anyhow. Number 5, ordinance number 15-30, amending section 6.0301, regulating monuments at Mount Hope Cemetery within and for the city of Watertown. I'm ready for this, guys. Holy crap. So I need a motion and a second for discussion on number 5. Motion by Bill, second by Beth. Any questions on this? Hearing none, I'm looking for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Number 6, proposed resolution for necessity for 2016 street improvement projects. It is something, Shane, you're going to handle, but I will open the public hearing if there's someone wants to speak in favor of or against this. This is your chance.
Just for
Hold on.
record,
Okay.
okay, go
Hold on a
ahead.
second, Les. Go ahead, Shane.
Just for record, I passed out a letter earlier to each of the council members from Josh Susi, who was the original signator on the petition. He is rescinding his petition by signature, or not ratifying his signature by this letter. And previously, I had gotten a letter that was signed by all 4 property owners along the project that also protesting that. I just wanted that as record for the hearing purposes.
So if we understand you correctly, Mr. Susi is one who originally brought it forward to you.
He was
And
a
then once he
signator.
found out about what the costs are, he says, no, I don't want to do it, so he's withdrawing his.
If the cost stayed the same, He
He's
is not,
withdrawing it.
yes.
Okay. So, and I know that, Mr. McElhaney, you own two pieces of property, or you guys really aren't in favor at this cost. There's other people that are, you folks are there, and you're not in favor of the cost either. So currently, what we're looking at is nobody's in favor of this.
That's correct. Now, just to be full disclosure, the McElhaney property, both of those were improved. They had improvements in 2005 and 2007. And at the time they did those
Can you show us
improvements,
on the map where this is at?
I can.
Somebody can.
Let's see. Okay, this First Avenue Northeast and Kemp Avenue East, it's 12th Street Northeast connecting between the two. That's the project that we're discussing. There is curb and gutter on the north half of the street on both sides. The remainder does not have curb, and it is all gravel surfaced at this time.
Which
So-
side is Mr. Susie's? East
Mr.
or west?
Susie is
On the east.
1201 East Kemp. Now, the McElhaney property here and here, as I was trying to describe, when they did their building improvements, they signed a letter waiving their right to protest whenever this project comes forward. So whether we hold them to that right to protest now or in the future is up for question, but I guess the letters that we've received have indicated 100% not in favor of the project at full cost. Just for record, I'll say the cost estimate is between $68,000 and $70,000.
Yeah, and it's,
There's some gravel base and I believe some recycle as well.
yeah, it's not a very good job of what we did with it, you know, and I don't know what the answer is to it. I live a block and a half down the street from there, and you know, it's pretty rough. They used to be able to go in there and blade it periodically, and since they put the milling down, they are not able to blade it. I know Rob and his crew tried to fix the one end here not too long ago. It helped quite a bit, so.
Shane, I'm sorry, how many other property owners are there? Are there just two besides?
Actually, there's a total of
Besides
five.
you, I'm talking about.
There's
three
five
more?
there's 5 properties and 4 property owners.
And all opposed, which has been the case for years.
I have
Correct.
and a question for you on that. When they brought that out there and they had the $68,000 or $70,000, that road's been in there for years and years and years. And I think, are you actually taking everything out of there and then putting in new base, new 9-inch base?
Well,
So, or do we do
the
that?
cost estimate is based on continuing the rest of the curb and gutter
Yeah,
and then putting in a 3-inch asphalt pavement and redoing the 9-inch subgrade, because right now, all we have is a mixture of materials and it may not be a consistent base.
so my question is, are you removing the base that's there now?
Yep.
You're putting in a 9-inch
9 inches
base
of
and
it,
you're
if
putting in
it's-
a 3-inch
Right,
mat, okay.
right.
Well, Shane, I'm going to ask you to kind of repeat what you said. The documentation's been signed that this would be paved someday.
By 2 properties. Not all of them. The ones that have been improved signed a waiver of right to protest. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be invoked at this time, but certainly, okay, I'll tell you that my gut instinct is that these people, some of them want the road done, but they don't want to pay 100% of the cost to do so. So if they have to pay 100% of the cost, they're protesting the assessment.
Do we know
This-
what type of appetite there is to share? Because we've got a number of these places around town that at some point in time, we either just gotta quit talking about them and let them go as they are, or we've gotta come up with a plan to get them done. We seem to be one way or the other.
Right. Now,
So, are we aware, is there any appetite to cost share at this point?
Let's ask them. Look at them right in the eye.
Are they all, I don't know if they're all here.
Well, there's, yeah, you own 2 properties.
State your name. You gotta state your name. If I may, I was trained as an engineer, and frankly, this becomes how big is a rock. We have no idea what the real cost of this is at this point. Is that correct?
yeah, these are just estimated costs at this time.
Estimated. That's the key word. I haven't heard it here again. This immediately I perk right up.
The normal process would be if that's petitioned for, get an estimate, but then when it goes out for bids at that point in time, then you would know what the final cost would be. And I don't know if you understand, but then what, if you don't pay for it right away, it can be just assessed and paid over a 10-year period. It could be spread out.
Well, I'm not hearing, and I read the agreement and that you guys sent out. And gentlemen, you've all been in business. Let me ask you a question. Would you vote for this if somebody said, well, this is this and that is that, and the engineering costs could run more? If you did, you wouldn't be in business. I'm sorry. That's just, and this has been a problem for a long time, and cost overruns are not unheard of, and they can become very, very excessive. And
But I think we've got some established numbers from the past that we can know we're not gonna be very far off.
Yeah, our cost estimate's based on recent history of asphalt and concrete prices. Just for a record here, based on the estimate, the highest assessments on this project would be estimated at $21,800. So it is a substantial investment by the 2 properties that own the majority or the longest lengths along the project.
Shane, I have a question. What would Les's responsibility be along with that right of waiver to protest that he signed when he got that platted?
I'm not following your question.
What would his liability? What would his what would his costs be?
Around
Roughly.
20,000.
20?
Yeah.
You know, and to Mike's point earlier, I know that we've talked, this goes clear back to Public Works. When we talked about budgeting some money for work on these types of, this is exactly what we were talking about. You know?
Here's, Bruce, and just to give everybody a little bit of a picture, we originally, back when we built, we petitioned to have the street paved. We had, from the alley north, all in agreement. And there is 200 feet from the alley south, and the council at the time turned it down because their 200 feet were more than our 165 each side. But I think that's the history. We then said, well, pave it from the alley north. And the city council at the time denied that request. So it hasn't been, we've been here trying to get it paved. Now, they brought 13th in, and I don't think those adjoining neighbors had to pay the assessment for bringing that street in. That has been what has put more traffic onto this street. I do think that this street project should have been connected with that one at that time, and this cost added on to that project. Because bringing that street down in, dead-ended into First, you know, they're either gonna go to 13th over there or 12th here. Well, it's closer to 12th. And so it should have probably been piggybacked on with that.
Les, you said.
Yeah, I live on 12th, and I can tell you that since they've opened up 13th, traffic in the mornings and traffic in the afternoon is probably over doubled on 12th Street.
Yeah, and I, you know, you did sign a right of waiver to protest, which typically means that at a specific time when the city deems it necessary to finish that project, that you would be responsible for the costs to do that. That's all I'm saying. So why would you sign that if you wanted it right then and there?
Well, we were turned it down. because the 200 feet was more, each side was more than the 165 that we had to the north. Also, costs have more than doubled since that time.
Shelley, do you recall on 13th Street, because that went all the way through LATI property? Do you know, did LATI pay for that road? Do you recall that? I don't recall it. And that's, she doesn't recall. Yeah,
You're talking from First Avenue to Bogue?
to Bogue there.
Yeah.
And frankly, you know, because the LATI bought the properties where the street ran through, I don't recall if they paid for that or not.
I do think it should have been a part of that project, you know, from the get-go. It was overlooked, you know, of what it was gonna do to the traffic flow.
Yeah.
So now here we are talking about it again.
So back to Mike's question, are you guys willing to try to work out some kind of a compromise?
I think it's more effect probably on the neighbors to the south. We do have our curb and gutter in.
Right.
From the alley north. It's really cost prohibitive for those to the south.
Yeah, so would
Because
you
they've got
folks-
more footage and they don't have their curb and gutter.
Would you folks be willing to compromise on that a little bit? Or you just don't want a road?
I have not talked to my neighbor across the street there. I don't, I can't speak for him. Frankly, before I made a comment concerning this, I would like to talk to him. I don't know what his situation is. I frankly do not think the structure warrants the cost.
Yeah. He's got a 25-foot wide lot by 200 feet long. You know what that's worth. And then to assess, his assessment would be 21.4, wouldn't it be, Shane?
I believe it's estimated at 21.8, but.
21.8, okay. You know, to assess that against a
Well,
property that's probably worth
And
25.
Right, and I wouldn't, in looking at this, if I lived down there, I wouldn't agree to do this either. And I think what we need to do is take this particular one, get it out of the issue tonight, and see if we can sit down with the landowners and come up with a fixed amount that's acceptable. This sin occurred many, many, many years ago, so, well, it did. And now to ask for that kind of money, I think that's unreasonable.
Okay,
And
not
and
only
so
occur-
I think that, you know, we're either gonna leave it as it is and move
And
on.
that's fine.
Or let's come up with a number that the city has to participate in with a reasonable amount back to the landowners. That's the only way. I don't think we can ask them to foot the whole bill, and I don't even think they could foot the lion's share of the bill.
I
in my
agree
opinion.
100%. I think, and I know we talked about this, about budgeting money several times over a period of time for these types of projects. I know we did that. I don't know where that sits right now, but I do agree. And I think we can work together on solving, or taking care of some of the costs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we can. I think what
Between
we've got to be
those
aware
two
of, there's-
twin homes, my taxes are about
There's more than that.
8,000
I
a
need to
year,
weigh in.
so there should be a little money somewhere.
yeah,
Well, so
there-
you got all kinds of dough to work.
No, that's what I'm paying already, so.
there's more
Unfortunately, the
roads-
city
there's
doesn't
more
get a
roads
very
here
big
in
chunk
town.
of that.
There's more roads in town than this one. And I think what you really need to think about is, everybody has said this word before, you're making a precedent. So Shane, you've got 12th Avenue Southeast going
Okay,
on. You've
yep.
got Harmony Lane or whatever that is, Mayfair or whatever that road is up by you. You've got this particular one. There's numerous roads. So whatever your decision is, you're probably going to have to live with it for another 3, 4, 5 different roads.
Okay,
But Steve, isn't that what we budgeted that money for? I mean, isn't that exactly what we talked about? And we
But I
were
don't
gonna
think we can pay
identify,
all of it.
we were gonna prioritize a certain number of roads that were kind of central in the community that we felt it would be a good idea.
Wasn't it like $300,000 a year
So
we
when
set
I
aside
bought
at one
my-
time?
When I bought my lot from Mr. Riefenberg down here, and I had an assessment for 10 years to pay for my road, why do they get a free road? That's my question. I don't like that we're gonna go in there and pay the whole darn thing. Now, if you can work out a deal, you're gonna have to work a deal without everybody out there. So Shane, you go ahead and you talk about it.
Yeah, I would like to weigh in, and of course, being new here, I'm neutral on the history because I don't know how long or how this became a gravel road in the first place, but it is my job to look at the overall infrastructure throughout town, and there are many, many locations that have the similar situation here. Now, the slippery slope that we're already on is going to be a tough one to unilaterally fix. And I'll point this out as an example. Right now, I have a petition that I'm trying to get on a business area on 12th Avenue Southeast. Now, those are all business-oriented lots facing a very similar situation. They don't have any curb and gutter, it's just a gravel surface. They have all the other infrastructure, sewer, water, all that stuff's in, and now they're circulating a petition to get the street paved. But the difference between that project and this project is they have a financial means of recovery because they are business-oriented. These are not recoverable costs to residential. So whatever you decide to do, I mean, at least weigh out whether you want to make a unilateral decision or if you're going to take a different track for commercial properties that have this issue versus residential avenues, because they are two distinctly different things, and I don't want you to trip yourself by making a quick decision.
Shane, the business properties you talked about, do they have similar agreements in place, for?
Yes, they do. In fact, that's been a policy, as I understand it, for several years now. Well, obviously since at least 2005, that if there's not a fully improved project, that when we get the majority of the lots sold and improved adjacent to these gravel streets, that gives us the right to go in and impose a project and get them paved.
I think we want to pull this off the agenda for now. I think it needs further discussion because you've got tons of property down there by Shopko. Those people have talked to me, they want roads in, but they don't want to pay it. They want us to pay that. Somehow, we need to have further discussion on this.
Do you just want to take a vote on it? Because if you pull it, you either have to table it or, you're going to have to redo the public hearing. There's, they would have to go back through the process. So do you want to just vote on the
I truly
resolution?
think, guys, these roads need more discussion than what we're talking about right now.
Well, they've asked to have it,
A lot
basically,
of
they've
time.
asked to have it pulled, so, or taken off the deal at this point, so.
Yeah, so if we do a vote and
Just so you know, that the timeline of the petition that's coming forward on the 12th Avenue Southeast, I'm hoping to have that to you in December at the second council meeting.
But
So
I'm
if
not
you wanted
opposed.
to, no, so what I'm saying is if you want to, I'm just assuming that this would get voted down now and it could be re-brought back in the same council meeting in
but
December
they're not
if the council
asking for
chooses.
any.
But they're
any
wanting it,
dollars
in
from
this
the
case,
city.
the property owners don't want it. This other one, you're saying the business owners want
Right,
it. So
but what
that's
I'm
not
saying is
really
if
an issue.
there's some negotiation on price here that brings these guys back to the table, we can still include it in a project in 2016.
And if we
So do
had
I
a
have
set
motion and a
amount,
second on this? Do I have a motion?
No, I don't believe you've closed the
Okay,
public
I'm
hearing.
gonna go here and go out on a limb, and I'm gonna ask for a motion in a second.
So I'll make a motion with a recommendation, it's rejected.
So I have a motion by Mike.
Mayor,
Yes.
you have to close the public hearing first.
Okay, public hearing is closed. So I do have a motion from Mike Danforth to deny this. I have a second by Bruce. Any other questions? Yes. So I'm looking for council action. All those in favor of denying this proposal, say yes. Aye. Aye's fine. Opposed? Motion carried. It is denied. So we're gonna bring this back, Les. We're gonna talk about this.
yeah. And
because
I
there's-
think on a work session, if we could come to a number and say, hey, property owners, you pay this much,
Right.
then we could talk about it. But like Joe says, to talk about an infinite number, it's a little tough. The other thing is there's 30 foot of boulevard on the north side.
Right.
And if you read the way it says, that's gonna be included in the project and we gotta pay for it. His numbers only calculate the footage of the lots, not
Yeah.
including the right
Yeah,
of
and
way.
we'll have to discuss that. And Joe, we wouldn't charge you more than 3 times than what it's worth. You know that.
You
Come
know,
on.
but if we had a set number, then I think we'd have something to,
We
city
can do it.
pays.
We'll get there. We'll
Yeah.
work this out. get
Here and
this figured
beyond.
Yeah,
out.
I think the
It's
critical
bigger. It's a
thing.
big picture here.
Yeah, the critical thing is we have to establish policy.
Yes.
And we really don't
And
have
I'll
that yet.
I'll leave that to you guys.
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, so much for a fast meeting tonight. Okay. Number 7, consideration of bids for auditing services for the city of Watertown. Shelley, if you want to kind of give us an idea of what's going on here?
This is something that we do every 3 to 6 years. In the past, we've gone out for RFPs, and it's been based on 3 years with the option to renew for another 3 years, so we ask them for 6 years of pricing. In the past, we've used William Neal for as long as any of us remember. When we went out for RFPs, we sent them to all the local firms in Watertown, and then we included 9 additional ones outside of Watertown. We received 3 back, and those are in your packets and what their prices are. And then I just put some notes on there, basically kind of what they are saying the services that you get for the money that they're charging. So basically, you 10 council members are considered the audit committee, since we don't have a formal audit committee. So it's up to you to determine what level of services you want, what auditing service you want, and then the finance office as management is here to work with whatever firm you choose to put out those financial statements for them to audit.
Shelley, I'm gonna jump in with a few questions now. First of all, I got the utmost regard for the William Neal firm. They've been competitors of our firm for decades, and a lot of regard for them. Now, I want to clarify the 35,550, for example, for 2015. That is the total, which includes the utility portion of the audit.
Correct. All of these numbers do.
Okay. Now, I was concerned, and I think you addressed it, but you said no GASB experience and GASB general accepted or governmental
Government Accounting Standard Board.
There we go.
Yep.
You said no GASB experience. Do you want to expound on that a little bit?
Well, just expertise. Basically, what the other 2 firms, they're bigger firms, and so one of the big benefits that they have is they actually have a dedicated staff member, and sometimes multiple, that they are considered GASB experts. They don't do any auditing, they don't do anything other than eat, sleep, GASB pronouncements, and there's 70 some of them. And then they will review all of the documents to make sure that those are meeting all of those standards. And we do send it to the Government Finance Officers Association for that award. So making sure that we are adhering by all of those rules is really important. And it wasn't meant as a slam to William Neal. They're a smaller company, and so they don't have a designated person. He basically has to wear 2 hats. He has to audit and kind of be the GASB expert at the same time.
Just a comment from our perspective. We don't have a GASB person as such in our firm either, but we've turned out a lot of governmental audits over the years. So I don't see that as being necessarily a big black mark against the William Neal firm, not having a designated person. But a couple other things yet. I know it's been an issue as far as getting the work turned out timely every year. Do you want to comment on that, Shelley?
It is. They do take more time, and that's really because they're not as big of a staff, and they wear multiple hats. The mayor and I sat down and talked to Troy Heeb, who is the auditor in charge of the city audit, and we did address that issue and ask that they would kind of tighten up the field work and what they could do. And he did come back with an email, and he had talked to Adam at the utilities, who is my counterpart at the utilities, and they would work with the utilities from March 1st to March 18th, and then they would do the city field work from April 4th to May 13th, which is a considerable shortening of the time frame. And so I feel a lot more comfortable with this time frame than taking it out to the end of June, which is what we've normally had.
Okay, one more question now, Shelley. I know since the Enron mess here a number of years ago, publicly traded companies are required to have an auditor rotation every, I think it's 6 or 7 years, something like that. We don't have that requirement. Is there a concern from your part or from, you know, my colleagues up here, having the same firm that has done this for, it's probably been 20, 30 years? And again, I'm not saying that the quality of work is not there, but is there a concern from our standpoint having the same auditors year after year?
There is always that, you know, I mean, I go to enough CPE training and, you know, they always tell you it's not a bad thing to shake things up once in a while. The state used to do that, and they just don't have the time. They just kind of concentrate on their counties and the state. But there is always that something will be overlooked because they're so used to seeing something. The rapport, we do have a really good relationship with Troy. We can talk just about anything out with him. Any disagreements, you know, we really don't have a whole lot of those. So there is always that concern. On the flip side, he does know the city very well. And so when we do run into issues like when we've done these bonding issues, when we do defeasance of old debt, he is a really good resource because he knows what our financial statements should look like, and he knows how to make sure that if anything looks out of place, he can catch that stuff.
I guess I would comment again from personal experience that history is very important as well. I mean, it's nice to get that turnover and a new perspective, but that history and familiarity is very important. And we've got clients that we have audited for decades as well. And I understand the other side of it, but I think that experience is so valuable too that I don't see that as being a big negative relative to continuing a relationship with a William Neal firm.
Why wouldn't a Vilhauer Snyder bid on something like this? We send out the thing to them. You know, we get William Neal, we get I.D. Bailey, we get BKD. Why wouldn't a firm like yours bid on something?
We can't because of my position on the council.
No, but let's say before, because I've been here 6 years and I've never seen Vilhauer bid on something like this, Glenn.
It was primarily because the timing of the engagement. Because the bulk of the work from our perspective, we feel like needs to be done from that January to April timeframe. And as a result, we just felt like we did not have the staffing to want to gear up for it with our other workload and engagements that we have. That's a primary reason why our firm has not shown an interest. Now it's a moot point because of my position on the council.
Oh, I understand that.
We're not
I'm just
independent.
curious about the previous, 6 years that I've been on. You know, I've never seen a bid come in from your firm on that. I thought maybe it was because of, you are busy with the school system, and I thought maybe you didn't have the time to, and you answered that.
No, you're exactly right, Mayor, that it was a time constraint from our standpoint.
I would just make the comment, you've pointed out they don't have the GASB expertise, but apparently that hasn't had a lot of effect because the books you do have gotten recognized for I don't know how many years now, so it doesn't appear that's having any negative effect. Is that a fair statement?
And I just want to be clear that this is something that's a responsibility of Shelley to go out and get other bids. I mean, it's not like she's trying to find another firm, but I do believe it's your responsibility to the public of the city of Watertown to go out and see where we're at. We can't just say, here, let's do this.
Right. We've always tried to just look out there and get some bids and have the conversation. And as the audit committee, you guys need to determine where your comfort level is, what services you want from who and for how long. And to your point with the GASB expertise, I think with the working relationship, Kristen does a lot of work as well with the CAFR, our annual report. And we really do have a good working relationship. So when we do run into some of these really complicated GASB pronouncements, we've been able to work through it together. He reads, we read, we talk it through, we talk to the state. We talk to other communities and we get through it. So no, not having a designated person has not hurt the city to this point. It's just one of the benefits that other firms give you, that we wouldn't have to spend all that extra time doing that research. There's somebody that we could have at our disposal.
Shelley, is Troy or the Willie Neal firm fairly accessible throughout the year then, other than just the audit matters? Are they accessible to assist you as questions come up throughout the year that aren't audit related necessarily?
I'm sure they are. There's very few that we would ever talk to him about, but yeah, he's just a phone call away and very accessible.
So, thank you. I'm going to look for a motion in a second if there's any more discussion.
I'd move that we accept the William Neal proposal.
Second.
Motion by Bill, second by Glenn. Any other questions on it?
This is a 6-year, this is for all 6 years then, the contract?
It'll start with the 3, and then there's an option to renew as
Okay.
long as there aren't any significant issues.
And I mean, it is the lowest bid, and I haven't heard any negative, so it'd be difficult for me to say to go up.
I guess I would just make the comment, though, I would tend to hold their feet to the fire as far as the timing.
Absolutely. And I think during our conversation with Troy, he was very willing to do that. And they understand, they had Richard there that was working in the desk that long, and yeah, it'll work out good. So, any other questions?
I think, can't we just have Glenn do it on his own time?
Well, Glenn, there you go.
That would save a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
I don't know about the independence thing, though. I don't know.
All right, so I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 8, authorization for the mayor to sign a Homeland Security Grant Award for police equipment in the amount of $18,064.92. Ryan, you are up.
I think it was the first meeting of July where I appeared in front of the council and asked for permission to apply for this grant. You guys gave us that permission, I submitted it, and we have since learned that we were awarded the money. Just asking tonight for permission to accept the grant. It's for a total of $18,064.92. It would go to, there's no match requirement for it at all. It would go to buy us some filters for some gas masks, some canister style filters for the gas masks, and then some headsets for some radio equipment.
Okay, so at this time, I'll look for a motion and a second. Motion by Don.
Second.
Second by Mike. Any questions, Jeff or Ryan? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Ryan. Number 9, authorization for the mayor to sign a hazardous mitigation emergency preparedness grant award in the amount of $8,000. And Doug, I'll let you take that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is for training for live burn ARF training that we did previously this year in May. We did pay the full $8,000 for this training and did notice that there's some leftover hazmat funds. This one here, this particular grant, we do take advantage of it throughout the year. It can only be used for training and no equipment, and it does work for hazmat. Airplanes are listed as hazardous materials because they carry hazardous materials and fuels and things. So basically, we applied for the leftover funds by phone, and we're awarded those funds. And we just need your permission to accept those funds. And it is for leftover funds for the 2015 training that's already been done.
Okay, so at this time, I'll look for a motion and a second for
So moved.
discussion.
Second.
Motion by Bruce, second by Dan. Any questions?
So Doug, just to make clear, this pays for what we've already done. It's reimbursement, basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Hearing none, I'll look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thanks, Doug. Number 10, authorization for the fire department to apply for a hazard mitigation preparedness grant for a standalone tornado shelter. Doug, I'll let you talk about this because we've had a little bit of conversation today also.
Exactly. So basically, get my bearings about me here. This proposed shelter that we're looking at is right by this soccer complex. You'll notice the gravel parking lot, and right down here, that's the soccer complex. So we're looking at this general area for a proposed site, and the reason we picked a standalone is it it's easier to get approval for a grant because it's very simple, straightforward. You can signage the building to with like you see in the pictures of the tornado on the side and stuff. So the other nice thing about a standalone shelter is the fact that it can be applied for after several years if we earmark a spot for it. So we're looking at a recommendation of a 30 by 40 shelter and applying for a grant for that to be built in this proposed area. I think this general area around this parking lot would be where we'd like to build it. And to my knowledge, we don't need that exact location tonight.
Yes,
As much
my
as,
suggestion, Doug, if I might just throw it in, we had this conversation today. If the city were to ever take those acreage up to the north there and want to build something or add something to our sports complex, it's really going to be right in the way. My suggestion would be to bring it down to the soccer field over there, right next door to the facility that's there. Somehow get it right next door. That's what I think. Otherwise, I think it's in the wrong spot.
yeah, these lined areas are currently in the flood area, but we can build up the elevation to get those out of the flood areas, and that's can be approved for the grant. The other thought is eliminating the bathrooms out of this tornado shelter because it would reduce the cost of this project, and you don't have to do any maintenance, winterizing, or anything with running water. Even chemical toilets, you have to provide sanitary wet naps and all that type of stuff. We do have bathrooms right here that could be utilized possibly with the tornado shelter, and that would give us more square footage for an actual emergency if we didn't have bathrooms in that. So my recommendation is to eliminate the bathroom and keep it very simple and just go after the grant. And these funds also, this grant closes in May. It's a 75-25 split. And so we're looking at an estimated project cost of $200,000, so it'd be roughly $50,000 for the city share. And late next summer, early fall, will be the grant awards. And we could potentially build it in 2017, so we could plan for the funding in 2017. Also, there'll be some federal grants that will be coming behind this current grant, so there'll be more opportunities down the road if we're not successful on this grant. So that's about all I
Doug,
have.
how many people would that hold, roughly?
We estimated at around 200. As I said, that's using the 7 square foot per person. That's what we use in the fire service for assemblies. And they don't really earmark that because of, I suppose, liabilities or whatever. So you'll never see a shelter that has will
Capacity.
hold so many people.
Part of the reason for bringing it back that far back in the parking lot is also to try to tie into utilities off the other side, right?
Yes.
So if we didn't have bathrooms, then it would be more of a moot. Yeah, and I agree with Steve that maybe it could be moved to closer to the road or whatever, so.
How far is that away from the mobile home? Really, that's one of the areas we want to try to protect or help.
Yes.
How far would that be if you move it another, well, that might be another 100 feet at least.
Yeah, this is probably 100 feet across there, but the nice thing about this parking lot is it can be used for the tornado shelter as well as the soccer field. If there's a bad weather, inclement weather coming in, we can utilize that parking lot. So we don't have to build a parking lot. It might be pretty easy on utilities.
But Doug, even if you moved it up to the 17th, up into the corner, then if you ever wanted to do anything with the rest of that city property, it wouldn't be sitting right in the middle,
So you would be like down in this corner?
Down in that corner or on the north side of the parking lot, either one, so.
I can tell you that getting closer to 17, you could still take care of this parking lot, but it'd be easier to get to from the road, but you're also going to have a lot of people parking down into here in an emergency, so, yeah, either way.
Worked out, as far as where it best fits, so.
Another consideration too might be, Doug, would be the softball complex. You can have 600, 700, 800 people out there probably for a tournament. And not everyone's going to have vehicles to get into that facility. Just another thought.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just to keep the process moving, Doug, you said you don't need to have the exact location in the grant application?
Yeah, I don't believe we'll need a stake in the ground, if you will. We need a proposed area, and we have to do some archaeological, which I believe has already been done on this area, and they would sign off on that. And then we just got to get a preliminary drawing. If we get grant award, that's when we'd have to put the stake in the ground before you accept the grant. So,
Do you know roughly how much savings there is by eliminating the bathrooms?
I do not. I do not know that currently. So, there was a thought of the chemical toilet, but sometimes you're just who's going to maintain them and things like that. So, my thought was maybe we could work out a deal with these folks and hang bathroom keys in there. So when we open that shelter, we could in turn open the rest areas.
I seen the chemical toilet that Don was showing us. It couldn't have been more than $10.
That is an option if you want to look at.
I assume the biggest cost of
chemical
that
toilet,
is the-
Talk to us about the ice arena. I know that was talked about, putting the shelter within the new ice facility. Talk to us about that, how that would work, what would happen over there.
Well, the problem with putting it attached or inside the ice arena is they want these buildings to be standalone. It doesn't mean that it wouldn't qualify, but they do want it to be standalone so they can say, this is your tornado shelter, and you don't have to go to another building looking for that. Now you can mark it and stuff, but the other problem is depending on the timing, if you earmark this into your budget for a tornado shelter as you're applying for a grant, if you show on paper that you've put forth the money to build this in, it would probably disqualify you from the grant. So you can earmark the portion, and go for the grant. But if the timing's not there, like I said, there's federal grants right alongside of it that we could possibly apply for if you folks wanted to. That's the main reason that it's kind of a timing thing, that if we decided we're going to build a shelter out there, we got the area, we got the everything taken care of, the preliminary drawing, and if we don't get it, we continue. Or
Well, we definitely need some type of shelter out there. So where we put it, doesn't matter. I think we can look for the grant and apply for the grant, and at that point in time, whether we put it out here standalone or
Yes.
inside the ice, it can be decided at that time. Can
Yes.
it not? Or can it or can it not?
If you get awarded the grant and you decide to put it inside the ice arena at that time, I would have to check on that. I don't have an answer tonight.
All right.
Well, what it might be is just an upcharge to go from a standard design to a shelter like this within it, so that would be your cost. Is that?
How big did you say this is going to be?
We're looking at 30 by 40. A lot of the shelters are 24 by 30 range. So we're looking at a little bit bigger one because of the masses of people that have the potential use of that area, including the trailer court, the softball complex, the ice arena.
Do we want to
soccer
give up a
fields.
30 by 40 space in the ice arena?
Well, what I'm kind of wondering if you can get a grant big enough for like about $8.7 million. And
You can- I don't think-
we get
I don't think-
5% of that. Huh? Big storm shelters.
There you go.
So do I have a motion and a second on this, Shelley?
So moved.
For more discussion. Let's get a motion and a second. So I have a motion by Randy.
Second.
Second by Don, I think, out there. So we'll finish up with some more questions here quick.
How close do we have to be on its location? We see, is it gotta be in this area? What if we wanted it farther on the other side of the road over by the ice arena?
You can do that.
I mean, does the grant matter at that point?
I believe in the pre-grant process, you can pick this area where you'd like it to be, and there again, you can pinpoint it at some point when you get awarded that grant.
So
I
the
believe
area
that to
is
be true.
more geographical than it is
Yes.
on this lot or in this side of the street.
Yeah, if you do a preliminary drawing of a standalone 30 by 40, and you say it's going to be in this designated area, I believe that's all we need right now. No matter if you build it here or across the road or down here, it's going to be the same drawing. I think that's what we need for applying for the grant.
Well, because the reason why I say this, if you go out there in the summertime, is there anything going on at the soccer fields in the summer? I don't think there is there? During the
actually-
tornado,
On soccer, absolutely.
all summer? No.
Don, you're more in tune with that. Give us a little rundown. He's traveling all the time.
Knowing whether or not it's, without knowing whether or not it's gonna be there, or there, or there, or there, as long as we're in a area? Is that,
Yes,
so,
yes.
so to move this forward, we could just give you permission to apply for the grant, and then like you said, we can put the nail in the ground if we
Yes,
get the
and-
grant?
Exactly, and the only thing we'd have to do is, like I said, make sure the environmentals are done, and that drawing could carry in that vicinity.
And I think you will be surprised at the environmentals on the east side of the ice, so we just need to be aware of that.
I think I asked this question in the work session a while back. If we do get the grant and for whatever reason we decide, no, we don't want to build it, are we committed at that point, or do we just have to just reject the grant?
You can reject the grant and forfeit the money, and there would be no engineering costs or nothing if you didn't accept the grant, so.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Doug. Rob, you've hung around. Number 11, consideration of bids received for a street department motor grader with a snow gate. Rob, you're up on this. Give us a little history on it.
Thank you, Mayor. We did go out for bids here, open bids on November 10th for a new motor grader with a snow gate. We had two bidders, very competitive bid, which was good. We were under budget. Low bidder was under budget. As you can see, the RDO equipment was low bidder with a John Deere at $250,900. The Snowgate came in at $7,400 with a grand total of $258,300. I'm just asking for council approval to purchase that low bidder.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll look for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Beth, second by John. Any questions?
I have a question. You know, between Cat and John Deere, what are your qualities? What are the warranty differences? You know,
Right. On the specs that I put out, I spec'd a 7-year, 4,000-hour warranty. So both bidders were the same on that. So
Any performance differences from your
reliability,
perspective?
yeah, we what we looked at, we would have spent more money if we would have done this. But a lot of places do a 7-year, 7,000-hour warranty. What we're finding on our machines that we're not getting as many hours at that 7-year time frame. We're getting around 4,000 hours. So
This 672 GP is what Mike got last year, is it not?
672G is what he got. This GP actually is joystick control and steering wheel control. It's slightly different, but it's basically the engine, the frame, everything's the same there. It's just the steering is a little different. That would be the major difference.
And how did it perform?
Yeah, it worked great. We didn't have a problem. We were a little concerned. We've been running 770s and 772s when it comes to the John Deere products, which are, in the past, were bigger machines. Now the 672s of current 672s are they're a little bit more horsepower than the 10-year-old 772s, and they're a little heavier. So the whole industry has kind of bumped those lower models up, and all the models have climbed in horsepower and weight. So it works for what we need. It worked very well last year. So, and
What was your budgeted amount?
$260,000. So we were, with the total here, we're at $1,700 under our budget.
You suppose they look at our budget book and say, okay, they budgeted
were smart.
$260,000.
But
Yeah.
they had a very competitive bid. Right now, part of the reason that I spec joystick controls was to bring in competitive bidding, because the only bidder out there that does government bids with a steering wheel is John Deere. So if we would have spec'd it with a steering wheel, we would have had one bidder, and they could have pretty much named their price. And in this case, it brought the prices down. It made for competitive bidding. So.
Okay, so I think I have a motion and a second on the floor. At this time, if there's no more questions, I'll look for council action. All those in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Get it done. No snow, so it'll be a brand-new machine next year.
Yeah, come on down.
Oh, God. All right. Number 12, consideration. Make sure we're out of town, Bruce. Okay, consideration of bids received for essential air service at the Watertown Regional Airport. I am going to look for a motion in a second if there's any other discussion on this. Motion by Bill, second by Glenn. Are there any questions that you have for either Todd or myself on the essential air? We had a really nice work session. I hope that folks that are watching this tonight will take the time to watch the work session with Mickey Bowman was here, the vice president of ADI. I think it's a great thing for Watertown at this particular time.
Steve, I don't really have a question, but the concern had come to me about the Minneapolis, having the flight to Minneapolis, and I think that was covered very well, that we didn't have an airline that had bid that. So if we want an airline, this is really our option. So, and he said in a couple of years, maybe they would consider doing something, but most of the people that I talked to were just tickled that we're going to have an airline, but really, most of them said it'd been nice if it would have been the one that would go to Minneapolis. I think that's our history, is that we've liked that. So.
And I think that's a lot of that question is just because that's the way we're used to going. We may find that there's way better connecting flights in Denver than Minneapolis. Maybe not, but till we cross that bridge, so.
I don't see, I just haven't reviewed this. I just don't see where we have an option. And in essence, we got two bids, but one is a paper bid, and I really don't want to get on a paper airplane.
Well,
There's no plan.
But that's what we have, is we have a paper bid, and if they get it, then they'll go establish a carrier, and I just as soon not do that. I think we have to go with something that has a history, even though it's new and in part of its ownership. I think we need to do it. I was very impressed with the Skyped conversation and review of the proposal that we had tonight. So I personally am for it.
I guess I would say too, I definitely in favor of it, but boy, really promote and advertise the heck out to get those numbers back up there where they need to be.
Well, this is really, to me, really affordable what he's proposing, and if he could get the ticketing and stuff like he plans to do, that's going to be another big step up from what we had, because that was a big problem in the past.
Right. And I just want to make it clear that even though if we accept this proposal, it really hinges upon Pierre, South Dakota. And if you have any connections with your Christy Nome or John Thune or Senator Rounds, if you have those connections, I would use them, and I would ask them to make that call to Pierre, South Dakota, and say, we want to get this ADI. We have worked extremely hard.
And also to DC.
And to Washington,
I
D.C.
would say Washington
And we
as
do
well.
have that number for you if you'd like to make that call.
Also, I'd like to add one thing. Looking at the hours that they're flying, there may be additional staffing requirements, but we'll deal with that in the future. I just want you guys to be aware of it. Being there, we have to be there 2 hours ahead of the flight. So we're talking 5 in the morning until 9 at night, 7 days a week. So
One
there
thing
may be
did
staffing issues, but
one thing did come up about the de-icing or whatever. Do you see that going to be a problem, or?
no, we actually are in the process right now of emailing us ADI back and forth. They may lease the de-icing equipment we have available for them, rather than them bringing in their own equipment.
That's their responsibility, right?
That is.
Did I hear that wrong, that the services were half a day on Saturday, Sunday, and not 7?
I'm going to check on that.
I'm pretty sure
the way the schedule is wrote, the times 7 and times 6 When a schedule is usually wrote that way, times 6 means they don't fly Saturday, the Saturday afternoon flight, but they fly the other 6 days of the week. So I'm going to have to ask Mickey about that. That came up tonight. So
Just to clarify, this is a 2-year agreement if we accept, is
That's
that correct?
Any other questions? Hearing none, I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose? Motion carries. Congratulations. Hopefully we got an airplane coming in there
Hope so.
for you.
There's a lot of work. so.
And if you would get an opportunity to give, is it Mike and Pierre?
Yes.
You have to give Mike a call, and I'll talk to Lori and just let them know what we did as a city, and hopefully they can get on board. Because I know they have not given the EAS to Great Lakes, and
Correct.
yeah. Very good. Thank you. All right, we'll move on. Number 14, consideration of change order number 1, which is a final to the contract with A1 Sewer and Drain for the sanitary.
13.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did, didn't I? Number 3, no wonder you stayed there all the time. I thought, what the heck's he doing? Authorization for the airport to advertise for bids to replace a vehicle. Todd, go ahead. I
Yes,
apologize.
the Durango. We're looking to replace it this next year. We budgeted for it. I had said we either replace the Durango or the pickup truck, whichever is in worse shape. And the Durango is definitely in worse shape. So this
Okay,
is
so-
just for permission to advertise for bids.
Right.
We'll
Yeah, we
bring
don't
the
have the
bids
bids in
back
yet.
and go through that. But
Yep, so what we'll do is we'll look for a motion and a second to advertise for bids for a vehicle for the airport. Motion by Beth. Anybody, second by Brad. Any questions you have for Todd on that? Hearing none,
So what?
about
The-
65 and a quarter?
Yeah,
I don't know.
depends on which runway. Yeah.
What's the purpose for it?
It's used daily, all day. We use it to do our field condition reports in the wintertime especially. So what that entails is we get up to a speed of 20 miles an hour, and we hit the brakes, and there's a machine that's calibrated that tells us the friction value of the runway and taxiway surfaces. And we have to record that twice a day per federal regulations. And then during snow events, we have to record it anytime the snow event changes or weather changes.
And they can call you at any time and ask you to go out and get them a surface.
They can, and that's where that 15 minutes comes in for me.
Yeah.
Is I'd be the one if we did change it to the way.
Mike would like to do that, though.
Perfect.
Yeah, just once in a
Part-time
while.
job.
Yeah, he does. 65. Okay, here we go. I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank
you,
you.
Todd. Now we'll move on to number 14. Consideration of change order number 1, final to the contract with A1 Sewer and Drain Incorporated for the sanitary sewer rehab project, increasing the contract amount $4,975.22. Shane, if you want.
Yeah, this is the final change order, and it's just an adjustment in quantities to as-built quantities. This is the conclusion of the sanitary sewer rehabilitation project for the 2015 year. The original budget, as shown, is $325,000. So the final contract amount in 146,243.09 is well within the budget, and we recommend approval.
Okay, so I'll look for council, a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mike, second by John or Bruce. Any questions you have for Shane on this? Sure.
Shane, how do we, I mean, I'd like to see us come in under budget, but how do we get that kind of a disparity between a budgeted amount and a contract amount? We're less than half.
Right. Of course, I don't have the prehistory of this particular project, so I'm presenting blind, but the company that did bid for this project and was successful is a newer company, so they might have lowered their unit costs to be more than competitive, and actually did this for a cut rate is one potential. The other thing is that we just try to estimate how much work we can get done in a certain amount. And maybe the volume of work, some of it might have dropped off that would have been included in a budget of $325,000, and so then we wouldn't anticipate the project to be that large, so.
What kind of work were they actually doing?
This was sewer lining, so it's where they go in, they clean out the existing pipes, and then they pull a sleeve liner in it that gets blown up with hot air and cured in place. And then they go in and cut the service taps back in.
So this is kind of more
It's
or less-
very,
more or less
very
by
highly
the- by the
technical
foot
work.
type of thing, or by the distance that they did, so.
Yep, and it's highly technical work, so that pendulum can swing quite a difference depending on the competitive nature of the bidders
Shane,
at the time.
I tell you, red flags go up when you start talking about, cut rate and buying it to get a job. I mean, are they any concern about the quality of the work being done here?
We had a very minor growing pains with this project. In the end, all of the product was acceptable, so we didn't have any issues.
Shane, I'm just curious, how long would a liner typically last in our neck of the woods? Do you have any idea?
It's still relatively new technology. It's probably only been utilized for the last 20, 25 years. Essentially what it is it's a method like the PVC pipes that are extruded in a manufacturing plant. It's essentially the same material, only they've devised a method of keeping it soft until they pull it through the pipe and the existing pipe, and then they blow it up with hot steam and air, and then it cures in place. So it's the same technology that's produced in the plant. It's just they've come up with a method to field apply it in the ground. So it's really very unique stuff.
Okay, and I don't believe I have a motion, do I? I do have a motion, a second. Is there any other questions then for Shane? Hearing none, I will look for council action. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This next one here, we're just about done. I'm going to bring up a couple items under old business. This was budgeted for the year 2016. I wanted to show you folks a little bit kind of what we're doing. This is in regards to the skate park. We've been having numerous discussions with the Park and Rec, basically Jay. What the plan is that we have $185,000 budgeted for our current skate park. I had a gentleman come to me and he said he will give us $30,000 additional dollars if somebody will also match his $30,000. It can be one person or it could be numerous people. So here's what they're doing anymore. They're actually designing these based upon what kind of dollars you've got. And this is just one company that does it. Flip the page there a little bit. The guy that wants to give us $30,000 says, I won't do it unless you at least have a bowl. Now this particular one costs what, 200, what's it on the bottom there, 217 or 237? $237,000 to design this. This was in Michigan. Let's go on a little further. Skate parks have come a long ways, guys, from what they were in the past. They actually get going on these things and they really don't stop. And they have parts built into them that are easier for beginners. And then as it go on, it gets a little more difficult for them. So I just kind of wanted to share that with you, that what the Park and Rec is going to be coming forward to you guys is asking you, and it's a different type of an RFP. Instead of them saying what they want built, they want to come to these companies and say, show us what you can build for Watertown and show us what can be done. So we would be looking at the skate park at about close to $250,000 is what we would be able to spend if we can get that other $30,000. We'll probably have to have two RPs on them, one for the 185 plus the 30 or in that range. But it's very, very cool what we can do. And this will be looking out kind of by our old ice facility and the possibility of nearby it to have our water park out there. We're not sure exactly where that's going, but we'll be looking at those things. So it's very, very cool.
Is that the splash park?
Yes. Yep, splash park. So I just wanted to bring that forward. Thank you guys for showing that. Okay? So you'll be hearing, John, you'll be hearing about that at the Park and Rec Department. You guys are going to be coming forward looking at us to go out for RFPs. But as I said, it's going to look different. That RFP is going to look different than what you're normally used to. Another thing that I wanted to bring up, could you put this on the board for me? This is currently the organizational chart of our Park and Rec Department. This is currently how it's doing. You'll see the names up on the top. What I'm planning on doing is I think we need to take a look at the organizational chart, whether it's okay or not. I think we need to look at some of these things, and what it shows is the park director there, and then it goes down to different superintendents. You got TK at the. I really can't read that now, but you can. Yeah, you got TK, and then you got Don at the zoo, and then you got Todd, out at the golf course, and then of course we have one open there. That was Ryan, and we really need to get that position filled. And the question really will pertain: do we fill it as is? Do we leave it as it is? Is everything okay, or do we need to make a few changes on it? So on the very top, I actually have a list of the 5 people that we're going to put on a little committee. We're going to get together and we're going to look at this organizational chart and then bring it back to the council and say, here we think it could be changed, or it'll go back to the Park and Rec. So it's got the mayor, it's got Jay, it's got John Solom, it has Randy, and it has Glenn on there. Those will be the folks that will be on that committee. So that's going to get set up right away, because I would like to get this going, because once it comes spring, if we don't have Ryan's job filled out there, it's going to be chaos. So we need to get going on that.
Who is going to be the convener of this committee? You, Mayor?
I will be, yeah, absolutely. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll get it started, but then we'll have Jay pretty much take that over, and he can work that. All right, any questions on that? I think it's something that we should look at. And then at some point in time, we'll probably break these down into different categories and look at each one on their own. Okay. Not sure why I had the lighted parade on here. Okay, lighted parade's going to go. I wanted to just discuss a little bit about, I'm sure you've all been getting emails and letters and things about the Stony Point edition. I don't want to take a lot of time on this, but I do want to be clear of what the engineering department is looking at and what they expect to do and what they can and cannot do, and what part is a decision by the city of Watertown on that Stony Point development, and what is the decision being made by the DENR and the Corps and the Game Fish and Parks. So Shane, I'm going to let you kind of run with that a little bit. I know we've had numerous discussions with Stanton. He's not here tonight, but Shane, I think you and I can walk through that pretty easy.
Okay, yeah, there's always ongoing questions and concerns, and actually a request for some information from my department, and that information will be coming from the engineering working on the Stony Point project. But the track that we had a plat brought to us, and we look at our ordinances and how fast we need to keep our responses to the information on those is 60 days. So we, at October 30th, got a request to put the plats relative to Stony Point, and there's actually 3 plats that are needed, one for Stony Point addition itself, 1 and 2 for the road to come up into Stony Point from Prairie Hills. So my staff and I have met with the developer and their
Shane,
owner.
you don't happen to be able to put that up on it?
No, I wasn't quite ready for that at this point. But anyway, those plats are coming forward to the Planning Commission on Thursday, and a few organizations have expressed concern about why we can entertain or bring those forward without some of the questions that they had to answer. And my answer is this: in my discussions with the developer and their engineer, essentially most of the controversy is centered around the proposed channel, which would extend Lake Compesca up into the subdivision. Now, our ordinances do not address any extensions of a channel off of the lake, or we have nothing to base our decisions on concrete ordinance provisions. So we're going to rely on the expertise of the Corps of Engineers for them to do their analysis and approvals, and if the Game Fish and Parks has any issues with wetlands or fisheries, we're going to also rely on those folks and to weigh in on that portion of the project. Essentially, what we're saying is that if the Corps or the Game Fish and Parks or those other governmental entities do not approve the channel construction, this subdivision can go forward as it's designed, and there just won't be a channel built. So all of the lots could be constructed, roads be constructed, everything can go forward as the developers planned. It just won't have a channel in it. And so that's why we're keeping this thing moving forward, because if the highly sensitive issues don't become a reality, it really doesn't hold back what he can do with the property. So we're sensitive to that. I mean, we do want to make sure that the environmental concerns and that if the channel is approved by the Corps, that it is built correctly. But my staff doesn't have the expertise to weigh in on that to the extent that the Corps would. So with that, I guess I can ask for any questions.
That drainage on that then, is that gonna be okay, Shane? You know, you say, start putting roads in there and now, you know,
Yeah,
part of that was a drain into the,
Correct. That will not impact where the water flows at this time, because that's still a low area where the channel is. It's called a channel outlot right now in the plat. That's still going to be the low focal point where all the water would still flow through that. It just wouldn't be open water to Lake Compesca. It would be kind of a pseudo wetland type thing, or maybe they'd adjust their grading plan, but the water would still flow where it was intended to flow.
Shane, what is the planning commission actually acting on or going to be recommending or reviewing it on Thursday?
Okay, the plats that have been brought forward need to be approved by the plan, or not approved, but I mean, voted on, yay or nay, by the planning commission, and then if they approve it, then their recommendations come forward to the city council. Now, my staff and I have specifically drafted a provision in the ultimate development agreement that ties the process of the channel to whatever decisions the Corps, the Game Fish and Parks, or the DENR have. And we're specifically going to, if they say they approve it and then they have a bunch of provisions that need to be followed, we've written it to where those provisions become part of the development agreement. And then, you know, that really kind of covers us from having to go back and reacting to whatever those provisions would be. So we're bringing it in, and those provisions, if approved by those other entities, we'll just tie them right into our development agreement right now. So if we go forward, in my opinion, he could go forward and start building his roads, his infrastructure, all that stuff. He just wouldn't have a green light on the channel itself until the other government entities approve it. So, or disapprove it, correct. I mean, I don't want to gridlock this thing for the next year, 2 years because of somebody not committing to make a decision on the channel. In my opinion, the rest of the subdivision could be built without a channel.
I almost fell asleep back there. I thought everybody could have some questions for you. No, Shane, I appreciate it, because I didn't give you a lot of time to think about this today. In our meeting this morning, I looked at Shane and said, by the way, let's talk about Stony Point a little bit. He says, okay. So I'm real happy the way that it turns out. So we'll be paying close attention on Thursday, because it will be at the Planning Commission. Any other old business we need to talk about? Mike, I understand that your mailbox will be gone tomorrow?
And my new one's up.
All right. Good deal.
Yeah, but I'm gonna run it over tonight.
It will be gone tomorrow.
I'm gonna run it over tonight and see if it's actually a breakaway, so.
It's a breakaway. Any new business that you'd like to discuss?
Watch somebody hit it tonight.
Any liaison member reports?
Just wanted to let everybody know, I know we've gotten a lot of good press on it, but we had our charrette workshop this last weekend. We had over 100 people there on Friday night at the public part of it. Had a lot of good feedback and a lot of good speakers. And then Saturday, we had 50 plus for the all-day workshop. I'm impressed at how many people got out of bed to get there at 8 o'clock in the morning, but really a lot of work got done. I think it was a wake-up call in some cases, reinforcement of people's ideas in another, and MSH Architects will be bringing something forward for us, probably at a working session, I would think, Mayor, wouldn't you? Within about 4 weeks or so, to let them know what our concept plan is and some of the things we can do. We had a lot of good discussion from some outside guests on financing and funding, and so I think it was all in all just a wonderful success, and I want to thank everybody who was involved in it.
There was a great cross of people there too. It wasn't just downtown business people. I mean, there was a great cross of people throughout the community that really want to see something happen with the revitalization of downtown. It's my hat's off to you guys for putting that together. There's really a lot of work you did. So
Well, I agree with you. I was just very impressed with, and it was kind of neat. By the end of the day, you'd have 6 or 7 different groups who never had a chance to interact with each other, discussing a issue. And by the time we got done presenting our solutions to the issue, it was amazing at how many of these groups came up with almost identical solutions. So clearly there's a common theme of what's needed or what's people want to see.
one of the most common themes that all those groups came up with is returning Kemp and First Avenue to two-way streets. So
Absolutely. And that was confirmed by 4 of the experts that we had there, development experts that we had there.
Okay, well, thank you very much on that. Any other reports? Is there any need to go into executive session? I don't. So at this time, I will look for a motion a second. Motion by Bruce, second, or John, and second by who over here, Randy? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.